Well, yeah, and kind of what we're talking about. Here's a thought of mine for women. So here's mansplaining hour with Sean. Are you ready for it? Mansplaining corner. I have two thoughts that I have for women that sound bad in this day and age when a man says like, "Here are my thoughts for women," or "My
Right.
advice as a man for women." But I don't think women should marry any man who isn't entirely trusting in God or confident in who God made him to be. And then also, I think that any man who is unwilling or unable to wait until marriage for sex is not a good man and should not be married. Do you agree with that? Like, would you say that that's a fair assessment? That it's kind of both ways. It's like I'm putting the blame on men, but also shouldn't it also kind of be the women's responsibility too to not be willing to enter into a relationship, into a covenant with a man that is like that?
I'm agreeing.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. One of the thing I would say when I first met my husband, the thing that really drew me towards him was his deep faith in God. I found that so comforting, and his conviction, and I felt very safe in that, and I still do. It's amazing, and it's inspiring, it's reassuring, because if my faith wavers or if I, am having a bad day, I mean, he is so perpetually just has a faith and a trust in God that leads me and has led me closer to God through him. So I definitely think that it's great. And also just dating an atheist, it's like very cynical. What a narrow,
Yeah.
and also just because I'm kind of artsy, just to think of God, as the world as a creation of God and the beauty of it, and the fact that I don't know God. What God is so infinite and mind-blowing. It's hard for us to completely wrap our mind around, but how amazing and mysterious that is. And the spiritual discernment or the synchronicities that you connect with throughout the day and throughout your life. And I just have this feeling like, yes, of course there is a creator. And for me, someone that doesn't believe in God at all, it's just so narrow-minded to me. It's just like, oh, okay, you live, you die, that's it. There's nothing going on. There's no soul. There's no nothing. That's basic to me. I think that's boring and bleak, and I don't connect with that at all.
Yeah. Yeah, when you don't put the creation and the beauty on God and you put it on yourself or other men and women, yeah, it's like so empty. It's so meaningless. Yeah.
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 What do you
But
think, Ashley? Godly man?
Yeah, yeah. What
yeah.
absolutely what I run into, like, I don't know if I've ever really been involved with an atheist. I've in the past, before really becoming more of a Christian, I've dated the agnostics, and then it's just always a debate. They always want to debate. And it's like,
Yeah.
which tells
Yeah.
which says your heart is kind of cold, and if you're just always looking to fight with people. So how much love are you able to give in a relationship if you just want to debate all the time? But yeah, I think it's bleak too, the atheism thing. That's what I'm talking about, right? That's what you asked.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's
Okay.
kind of like a similar kind of what we were talking about, but like, because I had this discussion with a male friend the other day where I was saying if like a godly woman is dating like a not like a just an evil man, a man of the world, I don't think that's going to work. I don't think a
No,
woman can bring a man to God. But I do think it happens, even though it's tough, even though it's difficult. I think a true godly man could bring like a lost woman back to God. Do you agree or
yeah.
disagree with that? Like, that's just one of those things where it's like to me it makes sense, but that might just be sexist or wrong, or because I'm a man I see it that way or something. But like, what would your perspective of that kind of
I
dynamic
go
be?
back I go back and forth with that. Because there are some beliefs that, a woman can bring that out of a guy.
Yeah,
But I think of Ruth and Boaz and that
yeah,
story in the Bible, and where Boaz, he had the field, he was a boss, and she was out there, she was working in the field, she was making a huge sacrifice, she was staying by the side of her mother-in-law, while she was grieving, and she was working, and Boaz noticed her hard work. and that they kind of came together in that way, as if she was already in the field and she was already doing. I read it when I read it, I look at it as she was already working in the spirit. She was already having fruit of the spirit, and here he was. He had fruit of the spirit too, more than her, because he owned the fields, and that was how their relationship came. And I love that story, but I don't want to. I don't want to discredit that a woman could stir something in a man's heart, that God may put a woman in a man's path to open his eyes. God is capable of doing anything. But as far as a man who is of the world and who is lusty, I mean, that's a long shot, girl. Come on. Yeah. Let's get real here. We're not here to change men, you know? I mean, that shouldn't be, I can change him. That's not real. That's not a godly thing. I don't read in the Bible anywhere where, you know, a woman changed a man from evil to walking a spiritual path. I could be wrong. I'm not a Bible scholar, but I that doesn't resonate. Yeah, and I've been involved with guys who claim to be Christians and who go to church and who look the part, and I fall for it. And we talk about that on the podcast. You know, I mean, I can be blinded, very naive sometimes. And I think we as women and men really need to practice and ask for discernment when it comes to our relationships, because we can lose time getting wrapped up in someone or something. And, you know, we need to guard our heart for sure.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't think that anybody can change anybody. Only God can change your heart. And that is, you know, if God can use other people to plant seeds, to witness. I think for me personally, my husband had a huge impact on my faith. I was raised Catholic, had some stuff happen in my teens. My mom and my brother died in a car accident. And I walked away from God. I was very angry with God. I don't think I necessarily stopped believing in him, but I just walked away and, you know, lived a worldly life, was an actress, very independent. And then, you know, I was successful. I was making a living, but ultimately by my mid to late 20s, I became very disillusioned. Nothing was satisfying me. All these things in the world that I thought I wanted that would give me happiness, I thought, you know, and I just felt more empty than anything. And so I started to seek God in a vague way. Like I would pray to God, not to Jesus, but I was sort of into the new age kind of stuff, like praying, meditating. I mean, horoscopes. I was all into that, but I was still seeking. And then my husband came into my life and he said, you know, pray to Jesus. This is the real God. And I trusted him. And I think God brought us together, certainly my husband and I. And through our relationship, I have refacilitated my walk with God. So I think it was partially my own heart yearning for God, but not necessarily knowing how to find him. And then a godly man comes into my life and helps me, gives me guidance, absolutely gives me guidance and leads me in so many ways. So that's kind of like my testimony a little bit. But I don't think my husband could have come into my life and I'd been just like a hardcore agnostic, let's say, still career driven. And he said, let me tell you about Jesus. I mean, I think I wanted to hear about God, about spirituality, about, you know, what else is there, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, Hannah, I love that story. I love that story about you and Dusty and your, I mean, because her and I both have a similar past where we were both involved in the New Age. And I love that Dusty pulled her out of that. That's beautiful.
And it was a slow process. I mean, I was still reading horoscopes and into, I don't know, just into all that kind of stuff that's really trendy right now. You know, for years, even when I was a Christian, you know, so, you know, as I said before, it's not like, okay, you believe in Jesus and everything changes overnight. I think God knows your walk and knows what you can work on incrementally over time. So that's why I always say, like, have grace and patience with yourself. Ask God for help. But, you know, it is a slow process and it is a continuous process to become more like Jesus and to think more like Jesus. And it's like I had 30 years basically of otherwise programming. So, and I'm living in the world. So I'm caught up a lot too. And you just have to ask God every day, get on your knees every day and surrender and say, I can't do this by myself. You know, I need help. And totally, it helps to have friends, Christian friends. I mean, having a Christian community has changed my life, because you're around more people that feel and think and believe like you do. But if you're only around people that think contrary to you, I mean, it's difficult. I think it's still important to have conversations with everybody that thinks differently than you, because ultimately we're all human. We're all struggling with the same core issues. You know, I don't think I don't believe that we should not talk to people that disagree with us or think differently. I think that having conversations with people different than us can deepen our own understanding of humanity. So that's kind of a random rant, but
No, I love it.
I love it too.
I love
Yeah.
it.